She started off as a teacher, went back to university and graduated top of her class, and took on a career path that has seen her work become the reference point on how healthcare at community level is managed. Our guest is the former Chancellor of Moi University, Professor Miriam Were.
Thank you very much, Mr.
It's an extreme privilege and honor to host a true living legend. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you very much. It's my honor that you came to talk with me. Thank you.
Let's start off. Let's go back to your early life, your education in Kenya and in the United States.
I grew up in Western Kenya, just outside Kakamega town, in a place called Shinyalu, Lukala village. I grew up in a Christian village. In those days, Christians used to come together to form villages. And I grew up in a Christian village of the Friends Church. And I went to school. In those days, most of the schools were by religious groups because the colonial government didn't have schools in the villages. And I grew up in the 1940s, so the only schools there were the church schools. I went through that school until, the Friends schools, until I got to KAPE, Kenya African Preliminary Examination. In those days, again, I'm talking about the 50s now, when there was only one high school for girls, the Protestant girls, which was the Alliance Girls High School, and one high school which was for Catholics, which was Limuru. Now, all of us hoped if we went to high school, we go to Alliance. So we were all waiting to go to Alliance. But in 1956, which is when I started my Standard 8 exam, when the results came in 1957, we got a message after that, you can't go to Alliance. And we said, why? Mm-hmm. Because they said too many of us from Nyanza part, which is current Nyanza Western, because too many of us had passed, and we could only have 3 places in Alliance.
So let's go back to your path to public health and the interest that developed.
Yes. So then when I was because I was a teacher, already a trained teacher, I was accepted to teach medical students. But I had to have a professional qualification in the medical field to really be a proper teacher in the medical school. So that is when I began looking for possibilities to train in public health for a master of public health. Mm-hmm. And as God would, some Americans came to Nairobi looking for people to do postgraduate training, specialized training from USID. Mm-hmm. They came in 1973, 74. And they interviewed those who were their early professional life, and I was one of them. And I told them that I was the only one who mentioned that I wanted to go for public health. The other Kenyan students mentioned, medical doctors mentioned that they wanted to do gynecology or whatever, the other pediatrics, psychiatry, and so on.
So you established the Master of Public Health program?
Yes.
MPH in Kenya, right?
Yes, the first one in Kenya, in fact.
So now how did you go about this?
Well,
and how has the field grown?
You see, I had been teaching in the department since 1974. And by this time, the surgeons had a master's program. The physicians had a master's program. The psychiatrists had a master's program. Only community public health, there was no public health. And the reason was because we were so understaffed. The university could not allow us to have a master program because we were teaching double. And so I said to myself, I must find a way to establish the department to be able to have a master's degree. So I talked with WHO, I talked with the other international groups, and they told me that they could sponsor teachers for a year or 2. And they did. They sponsored a doctor from UK, they sponsored another doctor from Australia, and they came. And now we were able to, we could actually mount the Master of Public Health. So we did. In 1983, when I became the chair in 1982. So in 1983, we mounted the first Master of Public Health program in Kenya. because even the Ministry of Health needed them, not only the Department of Community Health.
You've worked with global organizations like World Health Organization, UNICEF, in developing public health policies. Now, one of your contributions is in children's health. Tell us how this policy was developed from your work in Kenya, Ethiopia, and other countries. But specifically Ethiopia, because you spent about 15 years in Ethiopia.
Yes.
And I think it was very special to you.
You know, because when I finished, when my first group of graduates for the Master of Public Health came out, the UNICEF Executive Director came to Nairobi actually, and he told me, you said you would not leave before the Master of Public Health program. Now it is established. Now you have reproduced yourself 9 times because they are all graduated now. Now you better go and pay attention to Ethiopia because they also need you. And by that, at that time, the terrible famine was hitting Ethiopia. That famine, the drought and the famine. So out of I went there in 1985 as the UNICEF's chief of health and nutrition. And at that time, things were desperate because the mothers were dying, the children were dying, and the starvation was really high level. So one of the things I had to do was to actually mobilize food for the children to come so that we could give handouts to children in terms of food. And especially for the north.
The situation at that point in time was devastating.
Yes, it was a very terrible time because of the drought. The Ethiopian people are very responsible people, but the drought had really done this to them. And then, as part of this, when I was in Ethiopia, UNICEF established what they call the Child Survival Program. And they had a task force for the Child Survival Program, and I was a member of that task force. And many of the people in the task force were from the West and from the North, but I could give examples from the grassroots in my work in Kenya and in my work in Ethiopia. And always it was the importance of the community health worker, not the nurse. The nurses are important, doctors are important, and I'm not saying we should disband those, but I'm saying they will not be enough.
Now, you've been honored not just in Kenya, but also by other nations. Tell us about the Hideo Noguchi Africa Prize, given to you by the Japanese government. Then you had the Queen Elizabeth II Gold Medal for Public Health, the George G. Talbot Award of the National Council of International Health. All these international awards. And we're extremely proud that you as a Kenyan have received all these awards. We hold you with esteem and honor. That's why you definitely are our living legend.
You know, before I realized, I was just so busy with my work that I didn't realize that people were looking at the impact it was having. And the first big award we received was in 1978 during my first project on community health. And it was by UNICEF. It was UNICEF More Respect Award. And so when I was told that, the Department of Community Health has won the UNICEF More Respect Award because of your project, I said, so our project is important. They said, yes, because you're giving a good example on how primary health care can be made alive. And it has $15,000 worth. But it's not $15,000 for you, but for the University of Nairobi. So the UNICEF rep gave it, we were all there at the reception, and they gave this to the Vice Chancellor, they checked the Vice Chancellor, and the Vice Chancellor gave it to the department chair, Dr. John Bennett. And Dr. John Bennett said, this is going to the first computers of the department. And they bought the computers. So and then later on I learned that is the first time an African institution had won the More Respect Award. So I was very excited and I was very happy. And then others have come, other awards have come, and the one that surprised me the most was the Hideo Noguchi Africa Prize.
Yes.
Because I was told that there was a competition, a continental competition of nominations. Japan had set up a prize for the whole of Africa to nominate the person they felt should have the award. And so there were surgeons, there were there were many people, and they were these are what were true. You are either pure research, where you do medical research, or expansion of health services. And the part that I won was the one on expansion of health services through the community health approach. It was a very big prize, because when we went to Japan for
what did you feel
oh,
when you got that award? I mean,
I felt happy, because of course I felt that my work is recognized. But even more importantly, I felt happy that community health work is recognized.
now you co-founded the Zima Foundation. Tell us what work you're doing via this charity.
Zima Foundation, we established it in 1995 because, like most of us, my age group, you grew up in an area where so many children were not able to go to school because they couldn't have school fees and so on and so on. And my husband and I have spent a lot of our money on that for the community school, for the community children, not necessarily only in our families. But the point is that as you get more exposed, the ones who reach you are not only your communities, but children who have come for me to ask money from us, from Machakos, from Baringo, from Narok. Can you help us? So we thought we can't just think about community. Let us have an organization that can reach as many children as possible. And that is when we established the Zima Foundation. We registered it in 1995. We actually had been saving. We actually saved deliberately to up to when we got 2 million. For my husband and I, we thought 2 million was a lot of money, so we registered Zima Foundation. To our great shock, this 2 million was within a year. It was no longer there.
And finally, we're coming to the end of the interview. Your final closing words to us. Some words of wisdom, advice you'd like to give the younger generation or people as a whole. And coming from you would be fantastic.
First of all, we must not underestimate ourselves and our influence, whether it is for the good or for the bad of society. We must know that each of us has an influence, first of all on our lives, and secondly on the lives of others. And we must always ask ourselves, what is the direction of my influence? Secondly, for me personally, my faith in God has been very critical, because sometimes you come across issues that are very huge and you don't know how to go around them. And sometimes you don't even see a door opening, how you could get them. Like in my case, I was saying to you, I didn't do any science in high school, and I had given up having involvement in health, and God dropped help from nowhere. I was just sitting at home, busy with clearing my beans with my parents, and help comes in. So I think that we can get help without knowing where it is coming from, but it's coming from God.
A teacher, a doctor, an academic, and a believer in a holistic approach to public health. Her work for the last 55 years has defined how public health in the region is run. It's been an extreme pleasure speaking to living legend, Professor Miriam Were.